and that irritates me so much. I don't remember his name. I don't care to know because I hate that guy. Hello there, my fandom friends. Today I am going to be talking about my thoughts and feelings about Kaiju number 8 season 1. Now, this season came out very recently this year and everyone was talking about it. All my friends, the internet, Instagram, everything. And everyone was talking about how much they loved it and everyone's doing groups for cosplay and whatever. And I'm like, okay, like I'll give it a try. And I waited until everything was out, all of the episodes, and then I watched it. I did find this anime to be very interesting and it wasn't just flat out boring or anything. I just don't think it's something that personally I am very interested in. And so for those reasons, I did not really enjoy it. But before I move into my spoilery thoughts, I want to talk a little bit about my non-spoilery thoughts. So if you have not seen the anime, don't worry, I am going to be talking about non-spoilers for now. So starting off, there's only one season out right now. However, the manga has been out for a little while now, from my understanding. I have not read the manga, but there are currently 12 episodes in the first season. As soon as I started watching this, the feel of it being very similar to Attack on Titan was very prominent. Almost like a very modernized Attack on Titan. We follow these characters who are fighting basically these giant beasts, monsters, or in Japanese, kaiju. Just like in Attack on Titan, if you've seen that, we have our group of people who are fighting titans, these big, monstrous creatures. And so there's a lot of similarities there, just kind of modernizing it. And so instead of kind of the more medieval type weapons that we're used to in Attack on Titan, we get more of the technologically advanced weapons that, you know, we see in our daily life now. And then, of course, they upgraded them a lot more for this story. The story not only follows these kind of characters that go after these monster creatures, but these monster creatures kind of seem to have some kind of mystery shrouding them throughout this first season of the story. We don't exactly know where they come from. We're learning their terminology. There's still things that are not explained in season 1 that I'm sure will be explained later on. The music of this first season was pretty cool. I really enjoyed the intro kind of first theme song we got. I think it had a really kind of eerie kind of background tones. And then the very unique like colors kind of like morphing into like cells in the beginning. We get a bit of the characters and the fighting style. Lots of color, which I just overall really enjoyed. Before you go into the first episode, I do want to warn you, just like my friends did before I started watching, the first episode is a little more disturbing and gross compared to the following episodes. And so just, you know, be aware that there is some kind of gross things that occur in that first episode that kind of just revolve around these kaiju and the world building, and so it is necessary. However, just know that as a warning going in so that you're not, you know, getting nauseous over something. There won't be as much of that moving forward. So just as a warning there. That's pretty much all I can say for non-spoilers as of right now. You just kind of have to experience the story for yourself, but if anything that I explained just now was interesting to you, feel free to check it out. I will say that it has a very specialized feel for it, so if you are into kind of sci-fi, tech, futuristic, fighting creatures kind of in a more modern sense, I think that this story and this anime would be for you. I personally am a person who likes more of the past kind of stories that revolve more of like swords and knives, bows, kind of medieval type style, and not so much the high-tech sci-fi side of things. And so I think that's why this anime just fell a little bit short for me, is just because of my own personal preference, not because of the anime or the story and how it was written. I think it'll be a really great story as a whole, it's just not really for me personally. And so I don't want my kind of opinions throughout this video to sway anybody, so just know that going in. I think that this anime is very specialized for people who enjoy sci-fi and that kind of side of genre and fiction as opposed to kind of what I like. So just throwing that out, but we are going to have spoilers ahead, so I'm going to do a countdown of 3, 2, 1, spoilers ahead. We are going to start off with my favorite characters. Let's start with the pros. So my favorite 2 characters were Hashina and Reno. So I'm going to talk a little bit about each of them. Hashina captured me right away. I loved his kind of purple navy-ish hair, his whole character design. I really thought that his cheerful attitude in such kind of like a dark, gloomy time of fighting these kaiju was very different than a lot of the other characters, yet he still seemed very quiet and reserved and like to himself, as opposed to just being more like extroverted. He just had a very interesting personality dynamic compared to other characters. I also found out pretty soon into the anime that he was the voice of Moichiro from Demon Slayer. If you do not know, I absolutely love Moichiro. I saw the Japanese voice actor come to AX last year, and so I obviously just love the voice actor, so I'm a little bit biased. I think one of my favorite things about him is his weapon choice, and so of course we get to see him use these kind of knife weapons, and how when he was a kid, his family told him, you should probably just drop that, you're not going to make it far, but he didn't listen to them. He kept training, he kept doing what he knew was his skill. He is aware that Mina, his kind of upper person, is better at taking out the larger kaiju, whereas he's better at taking out the smaller ones. He's super quick. We can see through all of his training how fast and skilled he is with those knives. So like I said a couple minutes ago, of course, I just prefer those kind of weapons compared to weapons that like we have in today's, you know, time, modern stuff, like most of the other characters are using. So if I were to cosplay a character from Kaiju, he's pretty much one of the only ones I would do for that reason. The other character I'd probably cosplay is Reno, so I wanted to talk about him. He is my other favorite character. I really enjoyed him from the start. I really love his kind of care and love and respect that he has for Kafka, and he kind of showed that right off the bat as they became friends. And when he found out that he was a kaiju, not really fully understanding the situation, his first goal was not to destroy him, but it was to help him. And he doesn't want him to show off his kaiju, you know, skills and that whole look, because he doesn't want other people to try to destroy him. He loves him as a friend, and he's gonna, you know, stick by his side. And I think that that was very apparent and grew with his character development as the season went on in a really nice way. I really respect how hard he's working. He's trying to get better and better in his skills. Of course, he was one of the kind of lower level powered people in the very beginning, and so he's working toward getting more skilled in his fighting because he would like to fight kaiju. And on top of that, again, his respect for Kafka. Of course, now that Kafka has been taken, he doesn't want to give up on him. He has spoken out of turn multiple times because of his respect for Kafka and that whole friendship that they have. And so I'm very, you know, excited and curious to learn more about him in the upcoming of Kaiju number 8. Moving into kind of some themes and the plot. So first up, I just really enjoy the whole kind of friendship, love, and care theme that's been going on. I think this really started with Reno and Kafka's friendship, like I already just talked about. I think Reno was really the first one to believe in Kafka, even though we know that Kafka is older. He's the oldest one in training. He still got accepted. He's given a chance. And in the beginning, all of the other kind of people in that class were just kind of making fun of him for his age and how he couldn't really do things like the rest of them, how he had a power level of 0. But Reno had trusted him and befriended him and believed in him from the start. And I think as the season went on, it really showed the slow and gradual kind of power that Kafka was gaining, as well as all of the other characters, you know, respect for him. And I think that Reno was really the first person to start that. And once Kafka is taken away, we see that everyone in that whole group is like, oh my gosh, we just lost our best person. Someone who we looked down on and we thought was so lowly in the beginning because they were considered old, turn into our best person and the kindest person, and they want to get that person back. And so I feel like there's a lot of like friendship vibes in this show, which I really enjoyed. Something else that goes along with Kafka is that he has now, of course, turned into a kaiju. And I think that the kind of symbolism there, at least what I'm getting so far, is that turning into this creature that people see and deem as such a bad force on Earth, of course, they are out to destroy. They have these groups of people that do that for these kaiju. We see that Kafka is like a human kaiju. He still has human in him. Later on, we do see that he has kaiju in him, and it's kind of this mix. And so I feel like there's this theme and kind of plot point of a character trying to find their true self and having to maybe kind of balance and try to outweigh all of kind of the evil within you, countering that by being your true kind of kind, respectful person, meaning Kafka, trying to fight that kind of demon side that's kind of living and brewing inside him as this kaiju. And so I feel like we'll probably get a lot more delving deeper into that as the seasons go on and as the manga goes on. Of course, I've not read the manga, but I think that there's probably something deeper there, of course, related to what we saw in the last few episodes when the kaiju is what was taking over, but Kafka and his true power being just who he is as a kind soul was able to kind of break that bad curse. And so I feel like that is probably going to be a really cool plot point to see moving forward. Related to the kaiju, I am wondering if each of the kind of numbered significant kaiju, so of course kaiju number 8, we see kaiju number 10, I believe, we have talk about kaiju number 2. I wonder if each of these notable stronger kaiju kind of represent something that is in our life or on Earth that is kind of like a disaster or like an issue. And I don't know exactly what they symbolize yet. We are still learning, and so I can't really pinpoint what that is yet. But I kind of draw the connection back to JJK and how all of the curses in JJK kind of resembled something. For example, we had a curse from JJK represent deforestation and harm on nature. And so I wonder if the kaiju and kaiju number 8 kind of resemble kind of like a worldly issue in kind of a similar way. My mind also goes to that because of how specific that kind of mushroom kaiju looked. It looks literally like mushrooms, and that was kind of part of his power. And so I wonder if that maybe symbolizes like, you know, drugs or something related to that. Again, I have no idea if that's what they symbolize or if they'll symbolize anything other than just being these monsters, but my mind was just kind of thinking like that. Another kind of theme and plot point that seems very prominent is just this whole government feel and politics feel. That's also something in stories that I don't really have a great time understanding because I don't really care. And that's just my own personal opinion. And so when we're seeing kind of like very heavy government and very heavy military talk and politics, I'm just like, okay, like it's just very boring to me personally. So I feel like that was a plot point that's just kind of gone over my head because I just don't care. Like, I'm sorry, but I just don't care. Next up, I wanted to talk a little bit about world building. I thought that the world building right off the bat was really well done. Of course, in the first episode, we are starting off with, of course, seeing this kind of military type group that are going after these kaiju. They are a very well-formed group that you have to exam into. You have training, you get higher, your level goes up. They have these very specialized suits that you wear, which I thought was really interesting and unique compared to other stories and other animes I've seen, almost turning you into a robot while you're fighting, which is interesting. And then of course we have our other distinguished group, like what Kafka was in the beginning, as kind of this cleanup crew for when the kaiju are down and destroyed and dead, which I think was a really cool detail because I think in a lot of animes we have a lot of destruction of evil, destruction of villains, and destruction of monster-like creatures or curses or demons, but you never really see kind of the cleanup of that. And of course, from what we saw in episode 1, that huge kaiju kind of dinosaur looking thing that fell and just completely got its blood and guts everywhere all over the city, you wonder how the heck is that cleaned up? And so it was really cool getting that initial character development from Kafka within kind of this world building that we're seeing. We're not just, you know, blowing it off as like some detail that doesn't matter. Something else related to the kaiju that was literally just seconds in one of the episodes was the streetlights. Of course, they had their normal colors for, you know, vehicles going through, but they also showed a kaiju on one of the lights, which is cool because it kind of warns people when there's a disaster related to a kaiju. And so just little world building things like that I think are really important to seed into the anime, and I think that this one did a really good job of just not skipping over those details. Moving into the cons of this anime for me. This is something I feel like I don't talk about a lot because I don't like kind of belittling a story or anything, but unfortunately I did have some critiques about this story, but again, they're more of a personal kind of gripe I have, not really with the storytelling or anything. So that being said, first up, I absolutely hate the trope, and I don't know what this is called, what kind of trope this is, but basically when a character is seen as this victim, but they're innocent and they can't do anything to tell other people of their innocence. And so of course I'm talking about Kafka. He is a kaiju who literally, he was sitting in bed one day and this thing goes into his mouth and he turns into a kaiju. That was literally not his fault at all. Of course, Reno was there to help protect him, and he's been, of course, respecting and protecting him this whole time because he means a lot to him. We see this later with Kikoru, if I'm saying her name correctly, that once she understands the story of where Kafka, you know, came to be a kaiju, she's like, okay, like I can respect that and understand that. If you get out of hand, understand that I am going to put a stop to you, but I'm going to respect your story. Which I love. I'm like, okay, cool. Reno and Kikoru are in the right state of mind for that. It's the opposite side, literally all the other characters that are like not letting him speak after they catch him. And so toward the end of the season, when Kafka does all of these things to save people working, you know, against the kaiju, in his kaiju form, but then he gets captured and taken away to this other facility with Kikoru's dad, which is not a good person, and he's like beating him up and fighting him. He's not even listening to what he has to say. Literally all Kafka had to do was explain how he looked like a kaiju. And that irritates me so much. Like, I hate that trope so much because I feel like if the characters just spoke up, they would be innocent, or at least innocent to a point where more people would want to help them out of this situation. There wouldn't be this need to fight and destroy and just mess up this person's life. So I don't know if any of that makes sense, but I was just feeling so much irritation watching this, especially when Kafka was like in that vehicle thing taking him away and he had the couple minutes with Mina alone and she said that there were no cameras. Why did he not speak up and tell her the situation? How he was sitting in bed and this thing went into his mouth and then mysteriously, surprisingly, he becomes a kaiju. I'm like, what was he thinking? Like, I know that they don't speak up against like their captains or whatever, but like in a time like that, I feel like that's kind of important to speak up. I mean, like, do you want to die or do you want to speak up? Like, cause that's really what we're at here. And I cannot get over that whole like state of mind of thinking when writing a story. It's just like, it annoys me so much. I know it has a purpose. Another thing I do not like is the trope where a person uses the skills and weaponry of the thing that killed their loved one. So now I'm talking about Kikoru's dad. I don't remember his name. I don't care to know because I hate that guy. But basically, he, if you don't remember, uses the weaponry and kind of skills that Kaiju, I believe number 2, used because that Kaiju is the one who killed his wife. I understand that he is probably devastated and completely heartbroken that his wife is gone. But why would you resort to using the weapons and the skills of the thing that killed your loved one. You are using those things as a trophy to make yourself feel better, but you're carrying it on every day in such a negative and revengeful light. This irritates me so much as a trope, and of course this is just how the storytelling is, and so I'm not bashing on that at all. It's more of, I just don't like him as a character because he is actively making those revengeful decisions. He reminds me a lot of the person in Legend of Korra, Asami's dad, Hiroshi, who kind of used a lot of these tech things, and he built machines, and he had this whole kind of factory line of thinking to kind of get back at the person who took away his loved one. It's kind of that same line of thinking. I just don't like him as a character and his whole mentality and that whole trope going on there, whatever that's called. Also, of course, how he treats his daughter, both of those characters is very similar and something I obviously do not like. But anyway, that is another con that I had with this story because of my personal opinions about those tropes. I'm just gonna talk about a few characters, starting off with Mina and Kafka. I really enjoyed watching their relationship in this first season. I think it was really smart of them to bring back the flashbacks so that we could see why Kafka really loves her as a friend so much, and the part in their life that was so instrumental for Mina joining this force against Kaiju, and Kafka for telling her that he'll always be at her side even when they grow up and fight Kaiju. I think it's really sweet that, you know, as his 30 years of life have gone on, around that time, he still thinks about Mina, he still wants to get to the top right next to her side, and he has not quit after so many times of failing that exam to get into the Kaiju force. And so I found a lot of their scenes to be super sweet. I hope he is successful in his goal, or at least successful in some kind of way that allows him to be fighting at Mina's side, or at least for the same kind of cause. Something about Mina's character that I'm interested in is her tiger. I don't really think the anime has explained yet why she has the tiger, and I hope that we find out why, because I do find that to be very random, and that's not obviously how tigers are. They don't really get domesticated like that, and so I'm really interested to have an explanation there. It might be something as simple as Mina lost her cat when she was young, and she maybe saved this tiger and then it's her, you know, sidekick, whatever. I have no idea, but I hope we get some more kind of explanation there in the future. A little bit on Kikuru. I did not like her character at all in the beginning. She's the typical kind of rich girl coming from a rich family. But as the episodes go on, after you get to see her, you know, fight at the best out of all of the kind of trainees in the beginning of this class that we're following, I loved all of her fighting stuff. Really cool, but then we got to see kind of why she fights that way and why she has the attitude that she does. And again, it's very sad because it's triggered on by her dad, who has kind of engraved into her that you have to be this kind of perfect person. You have to be the top kaiju killer. Your fighting style has to be this way, and everything that goes into that. And so I think it's really good for her to find people like Reno and Kafka and to become friends with people like that who are super genuine and just kind people, because she will see kind of the opposite side of maybe what she grew up with. And so I'm thinking that she will have very good development, so I have very high hopes for her. Lastly, again, I have not read the manga, but I do know that there is a very special character. I believe his name is Jen, who we saw at the end of the first season. Of course, he is under the dad that I don't like, whatever, but he seems to be the top captain. He is voiced by Koki Uchiyama. If you do not know, he is my favorite Japanese voice actor. I love him so much, and I'm just very curious and interested to see where that character goes. Of course, I do not know anything about him. He could be evil for all I know, just like, you know, this dad that I don't like. So I'm very curious to learn more about him, but from what I have heard, the very little, is that he's a very good fighter. And so I'm curious to see kind of his fighting style and more of him in the future. That is going to wrap up my thoughts and feelings about season 1 of Kaiju number 8. Again, it was not really my favorite thing in the world. Probably is going to kind of rank lower on my anime rank list from what I've viewed this year, but that's okay because it is not anything to do with the story or the author or the animators. It is all just my personal opinion at the end of the day, my personal preference when it comes to genre, so I'm not very surprised. If you liked it, that is amazing. Let me know all of your thoughts in the comments down below if you would like to share your thoughts or if you have any more questions for me about my thoughts and feelings, and I will see you next time. Bye!